Explanation of the evidence at the Pentagon on 9/11, created by Wayne Coste, narrated by David Chandler. Here's the table of contents, and here's the table of contents for chapters 9 to 17. Chapter 13, Evidence for Internal Explosions. There is no evidence of significant internal explosions in the Pentagon. The only possible evidence is a small section of uplifted second-floor slab. This could be attributed to a mechanical event, or it could be a local explosion, such as captured in the Daryl Donnelly photo. Audrey Barnes' report of an explosion on Fox News is actually a sonic boom. We'll be talking about that in much more detail later. Explosions would produce damage that would emanate from the epicenter of the explosion. Daryl Donnelly captured a fireball at 9:42 and 40 seconds. The released portion of the footage from the security cameras did not extend this far past the impact. However, the fireball was captured on video by two time-stamped live broadcasts. NBC and CBS both caught a fireball 30 minutes and 40 seconds into live coverage for the time interval from 9:12 a.m. to 9:54 a.m. That puts the start of the fireball at 9:42 and 40 seconds, assuming the starting time for the archive footage starts at 0 seconds. Here's the approximate perspective for the NBC video view. The camera is below the frame, looking upward into this view. Note there are three sides of the Pentagon that are marked. They're marked as solid, then dashed, and then solid, as a way of identifying the sides in the video. Here, the large image shows a distant and indistinct view of the Pentagon. The yellow lines at the bottom correspond with the sides of the Pentagon in the previous view, marked as solid, dashed, then solid again. The inset view shows part of the Pentagon wall partially covered with the logo. The next sequence of views shows the development of a fireball just to the left of the logo. CBS 9 also captured the fireball. It is because of these timestamp videos that we know the time of the Donnelly photograph. The significance of this time is it shows that the fireball was an isolated event several minutes after the major impact damage. This is not what caused the initial damage, and it is far too early to have brought down the roof of the building. This also does not look like a blast of high explosives. The flare-up took several video frames to develop. It is the kind of thing that might have been caused by an exploding propane tank on equipment used for the renovation project. Whatever it is not proof of pre-planted explosives. The ASCE report talks about uplift damage. There were two primary areas where the beams and slabs of the second floor were damaged by impact. The most severe damage was on the second of these areas, where the second floor slab was breached and pushed upward approximately 18 inches. In other panels in these regions, slab cracks were relatively closely spaced, 6 to 8 inches apart, in ring and radial patterns, potentially indicating an impact. Here is a diagram from the ASCE report showing the uplifted region as the beige area in the middle. The impact area is at the bottom right, so the plane is traveling up and to the left in this view. The uplifted slab was located about 100 feet inside the entrance hole. Here's a photograph in the ASCE report taken on the second floor showing the uplifted slab. This could easily be accounted for as a mechanical uplift due to the large plane breaking up underneath the slab. This does not rule out an explosion under the slab, but it certainly doesn't prove it. The remnants of columns 15, 16, and 17 are hanging from their upper attachment points and broken off at the bottom. It has been suggested that they are leaning outward at the top, pushed out by internal explosions, but in fact they are dangling with the bottom ends pushed inward. This diagram shows that if they were attached at the bottom, the attachment points would be under the windows, which is not where columns are placed. We have examined this issue in great detail in an earlier chapter. The columns along the internal path of destruction are all bent and bowed in the same direction, which is along the flight path of the incoming plane. Explosions would push the columns in different directions. Note that a bowed column that is not broken could occur only if that column interacted locally with a fragment of the plane and brought it to rest. If it had not brought it to rest, the fragment would have broken the column as it continued. The existence of multiple bowed columns indicates the plane was being fragmented, with individual pieces hitting columns and decelerating, while other material continued on. Here's a photograph showing the interior of the Pentagon. Some of the columns were destroyed, with the surviving columns bent, bowed, or broken and hanging from the ceiling. The damage consistently aligns with the direction of travel of the plane. There is no epicenter of the explosion with a radial damage pattern. The ASCE report details some of the individual columns, documenting the bowing and stripping of the spiral reinforcing material on the surface. An internal explosion would also distribute debris uniformly outside the Pentagon on the lawn, but as we have previously seen, this did not happen. The debris was strongly focused to the north. The debris outside the C-ring exit hole was also all going in the same direction, which aligned with the path of the plane from the entrance to the exit hole. If the debris had been scattered by an explosion, it would have been spread out in a radially symmetric pattern instead. Collapse of the outer E-ring. This is a drawing in the ASCE report showing the structural damage due to the plane knocking out a substantial number of columns. The break is along an expansion joint, resulting in 18 inches to 2 feet of displacement that was seen in the photographs immediately after impact. The diagram shows the layout of columns with the plane entering at the top left. The expansion joint dividing wedge 1 from wedge 2 at column row 11 is shown as the red vertical line. Note that pairs of columns ran along this expansion joint, one on each side of the joint. The columns on the wedge 1 side were directly impacted, while the corresponding wedge 2 columns were shielded. Therefore, the wedge 2 columns tended to survive. Here's a photograph showing the offset at column row 11. The building to the left continued to be supported, while the building on the right lost significant support. Joan Zitterkopf testifies that she was standing at her desk in room 4C453 in an upper floor, actually standing astride the expansion joint. She felt the shift of the seam between her feet and remembered 1 foot going up and it felt like 1 foot going down. She toppled and fell, seeing the bright orange fireball through a window. Some have suggested that the collapse of the outer E-ring was initiated by explosions. As reported, however, the initial sound of the collapsing wall was a crunch. Bob Pugh said, "I heard a crunch and I looked back to my left and the Pentagon, actually the floors, were collapsing right across from where I was standing." Dave Statter says, "This collapse just happened. It was not an explosion, a secondary explosion. This is apparently the damage from a great deal of fire and structural damage from the plane crash."
Time they could say was responsible for it and who's since been charged in it. In this case, I think this ratchets up.
Excuse me. This is the Pentagon we're looking at now, according to my monitor.
So that happened about 10:14 and 30 seconds.
Well, first of all, let's check in with Dave Statter at the Pentagon. Dave?
It collapsed right now. As you can see, I assume you're taking our picture. I do not have a monitor, but right now we just had a middle section here of the E-ring of the Pentagon collapse from the amount of fire and destruction from this. So now you have a gaping hole on the west side of the Pentagon here at Washington Boulevard, and this collapse just happened. It was not an explosion, a secondary explosion. This apparently the damage from the great deal of fire and the structural damage from the plane crash.
In Chapter 14, we will be taking a look at the April Gallup lawsuit.